The first thing Jax noticed was the gravity. It pressed down on him like an unwelcome guest, heavier than any planet he'd ever set foot on. The second thing was the air, thick with the stench of sulfur and something vaguely metallic. He coughed, his environmental suit filtering out the worst of it, but the taste lingered. "Welcome to Kraval, gentlemen," a gruff voice crackled through his comm. It was Captain Zhao, their mission leader, his tone laced with a forced cheerfulness. Home sweet home, for the next few weeks at least. Jax grunted in response, his gaze sweeping across the desolate landscape. Jagged volcanic peaks clawed at the crimson sky, and the ground was a patchwork of black rock and ash. Steam hissed from fissures in the earth, and in the distance, a river of molten lava snaked its way through the scarred terrain. "Remind me again why we volunteered for this?" muttered Diaz, his voice tight with apprehension. "For the glory of exploration, Diaz," Jax replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "For the thrill of the unknown, and for the hefty bonus they promised us if we make it back in one piece." He adjusted the grip on his pulse rifle, the familiar weight offering a small comfort in this alien hellscape. Their mission, to establish first contact with the Kravali, a reptilian species rumored to be the galaxy's most formidable warriors. Their homeworld, Kraval, was a death world of legendary brutality, a planet that had forged its inhabitants into living weapons. As they navigated the treacherous terrain, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Kravali were masters of camouflage, their scales blending seamlessly with the volcanic rock. He scanned the horizon, his enhanced vision picking up the slightest movement, but found nothing. Suddenly the ground trembled beneath their feet. A low, guttural roar echoed through the canyons, sending a shiver down Jax's spine. From behind a ridge, a colossal creature emerged, its reptilian form draped in thick armored plates, its eyes, glowing like molten gold, fixed on the human explorers. "What in the hell?" Diaz breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Before Jax could react, the creature lunged, its jaws snapping shut like a steel trap. The ground shook with the force of its impact, and Jax stumbled, barely managing to keep his footing. "Open fire!" Zhao's voice boomed through the comm. The air erupted in a cacophony of energy blasts and roars. Jax squeezed the trigger of his pulse rifle, the weapon spitting out a stream of searing energy. The creature shrieked, its thick hide deflecting most of the shots, but one found its mark, tearing through its flank. Enraged, the creature turned its attention to Jax, its eyes burning with primal fury. Jax felt a surge of adrenaline, his instincts screaming at him to run, but he stood his ground, his finger tightening on the trigger. This was it, the first contact they had hoped for, but not in the way they had imagined. The creature roared again, a sound that shook the very ground they stood on. It charged, its massive claws tearing through the volcanic rock. Jax rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. He scrambled to his feet, firing another burst from his rifle. The creature stumbled, momentarily stunned, but its momentum carried it forward. Jax knew he couldn't outrun it. He braced himself for the impact, raising his rifle in a desperate attempt to deflect the creature's claws. But the blow never came. A high-pitched screech pierced the air, followed by a series of rapid clicks and hisses. The creature froze, its head snapping towards the source of the sound. Jax turned to see a group of reptilian figures emerge from the shadows. They were tall and lean, their bodies covered in scales that shimmered like obsidian. Their eyes, narrow and reptilian, glowed with an eerie intensity. The Kravali, they moved with a predatory grace, their weapons, strange biomechanical constructs that hummed with energy, trained on the creature. The creature, despite its size and ferocity, seemed to shrink back, a low growl rumbling in its throat. One of the Kravali, larger and more imposing than the others, stepped forward. He hissed a series of commands, the clicks and whistles echoing across the desolate landscape. The creature whimpered, its aggression replaced by a submissive posture. The Kravali leader turned his attention to the humans. His eyes narrowed in assessment. Jax felt a chill run down his spine. He knew with a certainty that went beyond instinct that they were being judged. Zhao stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Greetings," he said, his voice amplified by his suit's translator. "We come in peace." The Kravali leader tilted his head, his eyes flickering over the humans. He spoke in a guttural language, the translator struggling to keep up. They identify themselves as humans, the translator sputtered. They claim peaceful intentions. The Kravali leader hissed, a sound that seemed to convey both amusement and disdain. He gestured towards the creature, now cowering at his feet. This is a klor, the translator continued, a beast of burden used for hunting. Jax exchanged a nervous glance with Diaz. This wasn't going as planned. They had hoped for a diplomatic first contact, a chance to establish friendly relations. Instead, they were being scrutinized by a group of heavily armed aliens, their translator struggling to bridge the communication gap. The Kravali leader approached Zhao, his eyes fixed on the human captain. He reached out, his clawed hand brushing against Zhao's suit. Jax tensed, his finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle. The leader retracted his hand, sniffing it with a curious expression. He then spoke, his voice a low growl. "They are weak," the translator relayed, "fragile like hatchlings." A murmur of agreement rippled through the Kravali ranks. Jax felt a surge of anger. Weak? Fragile? He longed to prove them wrong, to show them the strength and resilience of humanity, but he knew that any rash action could jeopardize their mission and their lives. He held his breath, waiting to see what the Kravali would do next. The Kravali leader, whose name, according to the now frantically working translator, was Karak, barked a command. Two of the Kravali stepped forward, their biomechanical weapons pointed at the humans. Jax instinctively tightened his grip on his rifle, but Zhao held up a hand, signaling him to stand down. "Easy, Jax," Zhao said, his voice calm despite the tension. "Let's see what they have in mind." The Kravali gestured with their weapons, indicating that the humans should follow. They were led through a narrow canyon, the volcanic rock rising high on either side. The air grew hotter, the stench of sulfur more intense. Jax felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple, despite the climate control of his suit. They emerged into a vast arena, carved into the side of a volcano. The ground was black sand, still warm from the recent eruption. In the center of the arena, a massive bonfire blazed, casting flickering shadows on the surrounding cliffs. Kravali lined the edges of the arena, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. Karak gestured towards the center of the arena. "You will fight," the translator relayed. Jax felt a surge of confusion. Fight? Fight who? As if in answer to his question, a gate on the far side of the arena creaked open. A hulking creature emerged, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. It was even larger than the Kalor they had encountered earlier, its scales thicker, its claws longer. A low growl rumbled from its throat, and it pawed at the ground, sending up showers of black sand. "A Gornath," the translator said, its voice tinged with fear, a predator feared even by Kravali. Jax felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't a fight, it was an execution. He glanced at Zhao, who met his gaze with a grim determination. "It seems we have a choice to make, gentlemen," Zhao said, his voice low. "Fight or die." Diaz cursed under his breath. "I knew this mission was a bad idea," he muttered. Jax felt a surge of adrenaline. He had faced death before, but never like this. Never in an alien arena, against a creature that could tear them apart with ease. But he wasn't about to go down without a fight. "All right then," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Let's show these lizard brains what humans are made of." He raised his rifle, checking the charge. Diaz did the same, his face pale but resolute. Zhao drew his sidearm, a plasma pistol that hummed with lethal energy. The Gornath roared, its massive form lunging towards them. The Kravali roared back, their cries echoing through the arena. The humans stood their ground, a small island of defiance in a sea of hostile eyes. The battle had begun. The Gornath charged, its massive form a blur of claws and teeth. Jax fired his rifle, the energy blast striking the creature's hide, leaving glowing red welts but failing to penetrate its thick armor. The Gornath roared in pain and fury, its eyes burning with a malevolent intelligence. Diaz unleashed a volley of plasma bolts, the green energy sizzling against the Gornath's scales. The creature flinched, momentarily distracted, but it quickly refocused its attention on the humans. Zhao fired his plasma pistol, the shot finding its mark in the Gornath's eye. The creature shrieked, its massive body convulsing as it stumbled back. Jax and Diaz seized the opportunity, pouring fire into the wounded beast. The Gornath roared in defiance, lashing out with its claws. Jax barely dodged a swipe that would have ripped him in two. He rolled to the side, firing his rifle again. The Gornath roared once more, a sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. Then, with a deafening thud, the creature collapsed, its massive body still. The Cravali fell silent, their eyes fixed on the fallen Gornath. A tense silence hung over the arena, broken only by the crackling of the bonfire. Jax lowered his rifle, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at Diaz, whose face was pale and drawn, but whose eyes held a flicker of pride. They had survived, against all odds. The Cravali leader, Karak, approached the fallen Gornath. He sniffed the creature's body, then turned to the humans. His eyes narrowed. "You are unexpected," the translator relayed, "but you have proven your worth." Karak gestured to the Cravali who were holding them captive. "Release them," he commanded. The Cravali obeyed, lowering their weapons. Jax and Diaz exchanged a surprised look. They had expected to be executed, not released. Karak spoke again, his voice a low rumble. "You have earned the respect of the Cravali." Jax and Diaz bowed their heads, a gesture of respect they had learned from the Cravali translator. They didn't fully understand what had just happened, but they knew they had achieved something remarkable. They had survived an encounter with a Gornath, a feat that even the Cravali considered rare, and they had earned the respect of a warrior race known for their brutality. As the Cravali escorted them out of the arena, Jax couldn't help but think about the future. What other challenges awaited them on this strange and dangerous planet? And what other surprises would they encounter in their quest to understand the Cravali and their place in the galaxy? He knew, with a certainty that went beyond instinct, that their adventures were just beginning. The Cravali led them not back to their ship, as Jax had hoped, but deeper into their territory. They traversed a labyrinth of volcanic canyons, the air growing thicker and hotter with every step. Jax felt a growing unease, a sense that they were being led into a trap. They arrived at a sprawling complex built into the side of a volcano. The structures were a blend of organic and technological, with smooth, obsidian-like walls interwoven with pulsing veins of bioluminescent light. Cravali warriors patrolled the perimeter, their eyes watchful, their weapons at the ready. "What is this place?" Diaz muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "No idea," Jax replied, scanning the complex with his enhanced vision. "But I don't like the looks of it." They were led into a large chamber, the walls lined with strange, pulsating pods. Cravali technicians scurried about, their clawed hands manipulating intricate controls. In the center of the chamber, a raised platform held a single, larger pod, its surface shimmering with an iridescent glow. Karak approached the platform, his eyes fixed on the pod. He spoke in his guttural language, the translator struggling to keep pace. "This is a healing chamber," the translator relayed. "It can mend even the most grievous wounds." Jax felt a surge of hope. Perhaps the Cravali weren't as hostile as they had initially seemed. Maybe they were being offered medical attention after their ordeal in the arena. But his hope was short-lived. Karak gestured towards the pod, his eyes narrowed. "You will enter," the translator said. "It will prepare you for the trials to come." Jax felt a chill run down his spine. Trials? What trials? He exchanged a nervous glance with Diaz. They had survived the Gornath, but what new challenge awaited them now? Before they could protest, the Cravali technicians ushered them towards the pod. Jax felt a surge of resistance, a primal instinct to fight back, but he knew it was futile. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and deep within enemy territory. He stepped into the pod, the iridescent light enveloping him. He felt a tingling sensation, a strange energy coursing through his body. He looked at Diaz, who stood opposite him, his face pale and drawn. The pod hummed to life, the light intensifying. Jax closed his eyes, bracing himself for the unknown. He felt a surge of heat, then a wave of nausea. His vision blurred and his head spun. He felt like he was being pulled apart, his body dissolving into a million pieces. Then just as suddenly it was over. He opened his eyes, blinking against the bright light. He looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. He was no longer in the pod. He was standing in a vast open plain, the sky a swirling vortex of colors. Diaz stood beside him, his eyes wide with disbelief. What just happened?" Diaz stammered. Jax shook his head, his mind reeling. He had no answers. He only knew that they were no longer on Craval. They were somewhere else, somewhere different. Jax felt the wind whip at his face, carrying the scent of something alien and unfamiliar. He looked around, taking in the surreal landscape. The ground was a patchwork of vibrant purple grass and strange, crystalline formations that shimmered with an inner light. Towering trees with luminous bark reached towards the sky, their branches intertwined in a complex canopy that filtered the light into a kaleidoscope of colors. Diaz was staring open-mouthed at a flock of winged creatures that soared overhead, their bodies a riot of iridescent hues. "Where in the galaxy are we?" he breathed. Jax shook his head. "I have no idea, but it's definitely not Kraval." He activated his suit's scanner, trying to get a reading on their location. The device whirred and beeped, but the display remained blank. "Nothing," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "No signal, no recognizable constellations. It's like we've been transported to another dimension." Diaz shivered, pulling his arms around himself. "This is freaking me out, Jax. We need to get back to the ship." Jax nodded in agreement. "Let's try to find some higher ground. Maybe we can get a better view from there." They set off across the plain, the strange, crystalline grass crunching beneath their boots. The air was warm and humid, the gravity slightly lighter than Earth's. As they walked, Jax noticed a faint humming sound, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to permeate the air. "Do you hear that?" he asked Diaz. Diaz nodded, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, it's like a low hum. What do you think it is?" Jax shrugged. "No idea, but it's definitely not natural." They continued walking, the humming sound growing louder with every step. Soon they reached a rise, and as they crested the hill, they gasped in unison. Before them lay a vast city, its structures rising like shimmering spires towards the sky. The buildings were made of the same crystalline material as the formations they had seen earlier, their surfaces reflecting the light in a dazzling display. The humming sound was emanating from the city, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse with life. "What is this place?" Diaz whispered, his voice filled with awe. Jax felt a shiver run down his spine. He had never seen anything like it. This was a civilization beyond anything he could have imagined, a testament to technology and artistry that dwarfed even the most advanced human cities. As they stood there, taking in the breathtaking sight, a figure emerged from the city. It was tall and slender, its body enveloped in a flowing robe of shimmering light. It moved with an ethereal grace, gliding across the ground as if it were weightless. The figure stopped a short distance from them, its face obscured by the hood of its robe. It raised its hand, and a beam of light shot out, striking the ground at their feet. Jax and Diaz instinctively raised their weapons, their hearts pounding in their chests. The figure spoke, its voice a melodious chime that resonated in their minds. "Welcome, humans," it said, "to the city of Elysia." Jax and Diaz stood frozen, their weapons still raised, as the figure lowered its hand. The beam of light retracted, leaving a faint shimmering trace in the air. "Do not be alarmed," the figure said, its voice a soothing melody that seemed to bypass their ears and resonate directly within their minds. "We mean you no harm." Jax lowered his rifle cautiously, his eyes still fixed on the figure. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice amplified by his suit's translator. "And where are we?" "I am Elysia," the figure replied. "And you are within the Convergence, a nexus point between worlds." Jax frowned. "Convergence? Nexus point? I don't understand." Elysia gestured towards the city. "This is a place where beings from different realities intersect, a place of learning and exchange." Diaz, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "But how did we get here? We were on Kraval just a moment ago." "The Kravali brought you here," Elysia explained. "They sought our assistance in understanding your kind." Jax felt a surge of anger. "They used us, without our consent?" "They did not intend harm," Elysia said calmly. "They are merely curious. You are, after all, a most unusual species." "Unusual?" Jax, how so? Elysia tilted its head, the hood of its robe shifting slightly. "You possess a unique resilience, a tenacity that defies logic. You have survived trials that would have broken other species, and you have done so with a creativity and adaptability that is truly remarkable." Jax and Diaz exchanged a surprised look. They had never thought of themselves as particularly remarkable. They were just explorers, doing their job. "But why bring us here?" Jax asked. "What do the Kravali want from us?" "They seek knowledge," Elysia replied. They wish to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your potential. They believe that you hold the key to unlocking a greater understanding of the universe. Jax felt a sense of unease. He didn't trust the Cravali, and he certainly didn't trust their motives. But he also knew that they were stranded in this strange new world, and they needed Elysia's help to get back home. "What do you want from us?" he asked cautiously. Elysia smiled, a gentle expression that radiated warmth and reassurance. "We want to learn from you humans. We want to understand what makes you so unique, and in return, we will help you return to your own world." Jax hesitated, weighing his options. He didn't like the idea of being studied like lab rats, but he also didn't see any other way out of this situation. "All right," he said finally, "we agree." Elysia nodded, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. "Then welcome, humans," it said. "To the city of Elysia. We have much to learn from each other." The city of Elysia was a marvel of living architecture. Buildings flowed and pulsed with an inner light, their crystalline surfaces shifting and changing like a kaleidoscope. Floating platforms drifted lazily through the air, carrying Elysians who moved with a serene grace. The humming sound that Jax and Diaz had heard earlier was even more pronounced here, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very core of the city. Elysia led them through a labyrinth of shimmering pathways, explaining the intricacies of their society. The Elysians were a collective consciousness, their minds linked in a vast network of shared thoughts and experiences. They had no need for individual names, possessions, or even physical bodies. They existed as pure energy, their forms fluid and ever-changing. Jax and Diaz, still clad in their bulky environmental suits, felt like crude interlopers in this world of ethereal beauty. They struggled to comprehend the Elysian concepts of time, space, and reality. "So, you're telling me that you can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously?" Jax asked, his mind reeling. "Indeed," Elysia replied. "We are not bound by the limitations of your physical universe." "And you have no need for food, water, or sleep?" Diaz asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Those are merely constructs of your physical existence," Elysia explained. "We sustain ourselves on the energy of the convergence." Jax felt a pang of envy. He couldn't imagine a life free from the constraints of his physical body, a life of pure thought and energy. But he also felt a sense of unease. The Elysians were so advanced, so powerful, that they seemed almost godlike. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being manipulated, that they were pawns in a game they didn't understand. They reached a large chamber, its walls lined with glowing orbs that pulsed with light. In the center of the chamber, a swirling vortex of energy shimmered and danced. "This is the Nexus," Elysia explained. "The heart of the convergence. It is through this portal that we can access other realities." Jax felt a shiver run down his spine. He had never been so close to something so powerful, so alien. He could sense the raw energy emanating from the Nexus, a force that could both create and destroy. "And this is how we get back to Craval?" Diaz asked, his voice hesitant. "Not quite," Elysia replied. "The Cravali have requested that you undergo a series of trials before you return." Jax felt a surge of anger. "Trials? What kind of trials?" Elysia gestured towards the glowing orbs. "These orbs contain simulations of various challenges, designed to test your physical and mental capabilities." "And what happens if we fail?" Diaz asked, his voice trembling slightly. Elysia's expression remained serene. "Failure is not an option, humans. The Cravali have made it clear that your survival depends on your success." Jax felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew that they were being used, that the Cravali were exploiting their situation for their own purposes. But he also knew that they had no choice. They had to play the Cravali's game if they wanted to survive. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "Let's do this." The first orb shimmered, and Jax found himself standing in a dense jungle, the air thick with humidity and the cacophony of alien insects. Towering trees blocked out the sky, their branches draped with thick vines. The ground was a treacherous tangle of roots and undergrowth. "What is this?" Diaz muttered, swatting at a large, iridescent insect that buzzed around his head. Before Jax could answer, a guttural roar echoed through the jungle. A creature emerged from the undergrowth, its eyes glowing red in the dim light. It was reptilian in form, with thick scales and razor-sharp claws. It snarled, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Jax recognized the creature from the Cravali database. It was a velociraptor, a predator known for its speed and agility. He raised his rifle, adrenaline surging through his veins. The velociraptor lunged, its claws slashing through the air. Jax fired, the energy blast striking the creature's chest. It stumbled back, momentarily stunned, but quickly recovered. Another velociraptor emerged from the undergrowth, followed by another and another. Jax and Diaz found themselves surrounded, their backs pressed against each other. "We're outnumbered," Diaz shouted, his voice tight with fear. Jax nodded grimly. "We need to make every shot count." He fired again, taking down another velociraptor. Diaz unleashed a volley of plasma bolts, the green energy sizzling through the jungle. But the creatures were relentless, their attacks coming from all sides. Jax felt a sharp pain in his arm as a velociraptor's claws raked his suit. He gritted his teeth, firing back with his other hand. He knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Suddenly, a high-pitched screech echoed through the jungle. The velociraptors froze, their heads snapping towards the source of the sound. A large winged creature swooped down from the canopy, its talons outstretched. It snatched a velociraptor in its claws, lifting it into the air before dropping it to the ground with a sickening thud. The remaining velociraptors scattered, fleeing into the undergrowth. Jax and Diaz lowered their weapons, their chests heaving. "What was that?" Diaz asked, his voice shaky. Jax shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm glad it showed up when it did." He examined his wounded arm. The suit's self-sealing system had already stopped the bleeding, but the pain was still intense. "We need to get out of here," he said. "This simulation is getting too real." They made their way through the jungle, their senses on high alert. They encountered other creatures, some hostile, some indifferent. But they managed to avoid any further serious encounters. Finally, they reached the edge of the jungle. The orb shimmered, and they found themselves back in the chamber facing Elysia. "Congratulations, humans," Elysia said, its voice calm and reassuring. "You have passed the first trial." Jax felt a surge of relief, but he knew it was only the beginning. There were more orbs, more trials, and he had a feeling that they would only get more difficult. The second orb pulsed with a cold blue light. Jax braced himself, stepping into the swirling energy. This time he found himself standing on a barren, windswept plain. The sky was a dull gray, the air biting cold. Jagged mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks shrouded in snow. "Where are we now?" Diaz asked, his voice tight with apprehension. Jax scanned the horizon, his suit's thermal imaging revealing no signs of life. "No idea," he replied, "but it feels like we're on some kind of ice planet." Before he could finish his sentence, the ground began to tremble. A deep rumbling sound echoed through the air, growing louder with each passing second. "What's that?" Diaz asked, his eyes wide with fear. Jax pointed towards the mountains. "Avalanche!" A wall of snow and ice thundered down the mountainside, gaining speed as it approached. Jax and Diaz sprinted across the plain, their boots crunching on the frozen ground. The avalanche was gaining on them, a roaring monster of snow and ice. Jax felt a surge of adrenaline, his instincts screaming at him to run faster. He glanced at Diaz, who was struggling to keep up. "Diaz, we need to find cover!" They spotted a crevice in the ground, a narrow fissure that offered a sliver of hope. They dove into the crevice, the icy wind whipping at their faces. The avalanche roared past, a deafening torrent of snow and ice. Jax and Diaz huddled together in the narrow space, their bodies shivering from the cold. The rumbling subsided, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Jax cautiously peered out of the crevice. The avalanche had passed, leaving a thick blanket of snow covering the plain. "We made it," Diaz said, his voice filled with relief. Jax nodded, but his relief was short-lived. He noticed that the crevice was getting narrower, the walls closing in on them. "Diaz, look!" he shouted, pointing towards the narrowing walls. The walls were closing in, the ice pressing against their suits. Jax felt a surge of panic. They were trapped. "We need to get out of here!" he yelled, pushing against the walls with all his might. But the ice was too strong. It was slowly crushing them, squeezing the air from their lungs. Jax felt his vision blurring, his consciousness fading. He thought of his home, of Earth, of the life he might never see again. And then, just as he thought he was about to lose consciousness, he heard a cracking sound. The ice cracked, a fissure appearing in the wall. Jax and Diaz pushed against the weakened ice, the crack widening. With a final desperate heave, they broke through the ice, tumbling out onto the snow-covered plain. They lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling from the cold and the near-death experience. Then slowly they got to their feet, their eyes meeting in a shared understanding. They had survived another trial, but how many more awaited them? Back in the chamber, Alicia observed them with an unreadable expression. "The Cravali are impressed," it said, its voice echoing in their minds. "You possess a remarkable ability to adapt and overcome adversity." Jax, still catching his breath, managed a wry smile. "Tell them we appreciate the compliment, but we'd rather not have to keep proving it." Diaz nodded in agreement. "Yeah, these trials are getting a bit old." Alicia tilted its head, the shimmering light around it rippling slightly. "The Cravali believe that your resilience is not merely a product of your physical abilities, but also of your mental fortitude. They wish to understand the source of your strength." Jax felt a surge of unease. He didn't like the idea of the Cravali probing their minds, dissecting their thoughts and emotions. "What's the next trial?" he asked, hoping to steer the conversation away from their mental state. Alicia gestured towards a third orb, this one pulsating with a deep red light. "This trial will test your ability to cooperate and solve problems under pressure." Jax and Diaz exchanged a look. They had faced physical challenges and environmental hazards, but this was something different. This was a test of their teamwork, their ability to work together in the face of adversity. They stepped into the red orb, the light engulfing them. This time, they found themselves in a small enclosed room. The walls were made of smooth, metallic panels, with no visible doors or windows. In the center of the room, a complex device hummed with energy, its surface covered in intricate symbols and diagrams. "What is this thing?" Diaz asked, circling the device cautiously. Jax examined the symbols, trying to decipher their meaning. "I don't know," he replied, "but it looks like some kind of puzzle." A voice echoed through the room, its tone harsh and mechanical. "You have 1 hour to solve the puzzle. Failure to do so will result in termination." Jax felt a surge of adrenaline. They were trapped in a room with a ticking time bomb, and they had no idea how to disarm it. He turned to Diaz. "We need to work together. You examine the symbols. I'll try to figure out the mechanics of the device." Diaz nodded, his eyes scanning the symbols with a focused intensity. Jax knelt beside the device, tracing the flow of energy through its intricate circuitry. The clock was ticking. The device hummed and pulsed, its intricate workings a maze of wires, tubes, and glowing crystals. Jax traced the energy flow, his fingers dancing over the smooth surface. He recognized some of the components: power conduits, energy regulators, and something that resembled a rudimentary AI core. But the overall design was alien, its purpose unclear. Diaz, meanwhile, was poring over the symbols, his brow furrowed in concentration. "These symbols," he muttered, "they're not just random markings, they're a language of some sort." He pointed to a recurring symbol, a stylized representation of a three-pointed star. "This one appears frequently. I think it might represent energy." Jax looked at the symbol, then back at the device. He noticed that the three-pointed star was etched on several of the energy conduits. "You might be right," he said. "It seems to be associated with the flow of energy." They worked feverishly, exchanging observations and theories. Jax, with his engineering background, focused on the physical components of the device, while Diaz, with his linguistic skills, tried to decipher the symbolic language. Time was slipping away. The device hummed with increasing intensity, its lights flashing in a rapid sequence. Jax felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. "We're running out of time," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to figure out how to disable this thing." Diaz pointed to a cluster of symbols near the AI core. "I think this is it," he said. "This sequence of symbols, I think it represents a shutdown command." Jax looked at the symbols, then at the AI core. He noticed a small panel with a series of indentations that mirrored the shape of the symbols. "I think you're right," he said. "This panel, it looks like it's designed to accept some kind of input." He carefully pressed the symbols in the order indicated by Diaz into the indentations. The device shuddered, its lights flickering erratically. Then, with a final sigh, it fell silent. Jax and Diaz slumped against the wall, their bodies exhausted, their minds reeling. They had done it. They had solved the puzzle. The red orb shimmered, and they found themselves back in the chamber, facing Alicia. "Congratulations, humans," Alicia said, its voice filled with admiration. "You have demonstrated remarkable teamwork and problem-solving skills." Jax and Diaz exchanged a tired smile. They had faced death together, and they had emerged victorious. Their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, was stronger than ever. But they knew that their ordeal was not over. The Cravali were still watching, still evaluating, and they had a feeling that the final trial would be the most challenging yet. The final orb pulsed with an ominous black light. Jax felt a tremor of apprehension, a premonition of something dangerous. He shared a look with Diaz, a silent communication passing between them. They had faced physical and mental challenges, but this felt different. This felt primal. They stepped into the black orb, and the world dissolved around them. When their vision cleared, they found themselves in a vast, dimly lit cavern. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something musky and vaguely threatening. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth, and the ground was uneven, littered with sharp rocks and debris. "Where are we now?" Diaz whispered, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Jax activated his suit's scanner, but the readings were distorted, unreliable. "I don't know," he replied, his voice tense, "but I don't like it." A low growl echoed through the cavern, sending a shiver down their spines. They turned towards the sound, their weapons raised. In the shadows, a pair of eyes glowed with a malevolent light. The creature stepped forward, its form revealed in the dim light. It was humanoid in shape, but larger, more muscular, with thick, leathery skin and sharp claws. Its face was a grotesque mask of fangs and horns, and its eyes burned with a primal fury. Jax recognized the creature from the Cravali database. It was a Drokar, a predator native to Kraval, known for its ferocity and cunning. The Drokar were apex predators, feared even by the Cravali themselves. The Drokar snarled, its claws scraping against the rocky ground. It lunged at Jax, its jaws snapping shut like a steel trap. Jax rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the attack. He fired his rifle, the energy blast striking the Drokar's chest. The creature roared in pain, but its thick hide deflected most of the blast. Diaz fired his plasma pistol, the green energy searing the Drokar's flesh. The creature howled, its fury intensified by the pain. It turned its attention to Diaz, its claws slashing through the air. Diaz dodged, but the Drokar's claws raked his suit, tearing a gash in the fabric. Jax fired again, striking the Drokar in the leg. The creature stumbled, its movements hampered by the injury. Diaz seized the opportunity, firing another plasma bolt. This time, the bolt struck the Drokar's head, penetrating its thick skull. The Drokar roared one last time, its body convulsing before collapsing to the ground with a thud. Jax and Diaz stood over the fallen creature, their chests heaving, their weapons still raised. They had survived, but they knew it wasn't over. Another growl echoed through the cavern, followed by another and another. From the shadows, more Drokar emerged, their eyes glowing with hungry anticipation. Jax and Diaz exchanged a grim look. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a cavern with a pack of apex predators. This was the final trial, and it was going to be a fight for their lives. The first Drokar lunged, its claws outstretched. Jax fired his rifle, the energy blast striking the creature in the chest. It staggered back, momentarily stunned, but its thick hide absorbed most of the impact. Diaz fired his plasma pistol, the green energy searing the Drokar's flesh. The creature howled in pain, its fury redoubled. More Drokar emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger. Jax and Diaz found themselves surrounded, a small island of light in a sea of darkness. Jax felt a surge of adrenaline, his instincts honed by years of training taking over. He moved with a fluid grace, dodging the Drokar's attacks while firing his rifle with deadly accuracy. Diaz, his movements less graceful but no less effective, unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts, the green energy illuminating the cavern with flashes of lethal light. The Drokar were relentless, their attacks coming from all sides. Jax felt a sharp pain in his leg as a claw raked his suit, tearing through the fabric. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, and continued to fight. He noticed a pattern in the Drokar's attacks, a slight hesitation before each lunge. He realized that the creatures were relying on their superior strength and ferocity. but they lacked the tactical awareness of human soldiers. He shared his observation with Diaz. Diaz, they're predictable. Aim for their flanks, they're vulnerable there. Diaz nodded, adjusting his aim. He fired a plasma bolt, striking a Drokar in the side. The creature roared in pain, its movements becoming sluggish. Jax saw an opportunity. He charged forward, his rifle held like a club. He swung the weapon, the butt striking a Drokar in the jaw. The creature's head snapped back, its eyes rolling back in its head. He pressed his attack, using his rifle to parry the Drokar's claws while delivering blows to their vulnerable flanks. Diaz, emboldened by Jax's success, followed suit, using his agility to weave through the Drokar's attacks and deliver precise plasma blasts. The tide of the battle began to turn. The Drokar, accustomed to overwhelming their prey with brute force, were caught off guard by the humans' tactical awareness and fighting spirit. One by one, the Drokar fell, their bodies littering the cavern floor. Finally, only one remained, its eyes filled with fear and confusion. It backed away, whimpering, its predatory instincts overridden by a primal fear. Jax and Diaz lowered their weapons, their chests heaving, their bodies battered and bruised. They had survived the final trial. The black orb shimmered, and they found themselves back in the chamber, facing Elysia. The Elysian's expression was one of profound respect. "You have exceeded our expectations, humans," it said, its voice resonating with admiration. "You have demonstrated not only physical and mental resilience, but also a capacity for tactical thinking and cooperation that is truly remarkable." Jax and Diaz exchanged a weary smile. They had faced death together, and they had emerged victorious. They had proven themselves worthy, not just to the Cravali, but to themselves. Elysia led them to the center of the chamber where the swirling vortex of the Nexus pulsed with energy. "The Cravali have witnessed your trials," it said, its voice resonating with a newfound respect. "They acknowledge your strength, your resilience, your humanity." Jax felt a surge of pride, a sense of accomplishment that transcended the trials they had endured. They had proven themselves, not just to the Cravali, but to the Elysians, to this advanced civilization that existed beyond the confines of their understanding. "They have agreed to return you to your world," Elysia continued, "but they have also extended an invitation." Jax frowned. "An invitation? To what?" "To visit Craval," Elysia replied. "To meet with their leaders, to share knowledge and experiences." Diaz looked at Jax, his eyes wide with surprise. "Are you serious? They want us to visit them, after all this?" Jax hesitated. He still harbored a degree of distrust towards the Cravali, a lingering resentment for their manipulative tactics. But he also recognized the potential for a meaningful exchange, a chance to bridge the gap between their two species. "What do you think?" he asked Diaz. Diaz shrugged. "I don't know, Jax. It's a risk, but it could also be an opportunity." Jax nodded slowly. He knew that Diaz was right. This was a chance to forge a new understanding, to show the Cravali that humans were more than just resilient warriors. They were also explorers, diplomats, and seekers of knowledge. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "We accept their invitation." Elysia smiled, its form radiating warmth and approval. "Then prepare yourselves, humans. You are about to embark on a journey that will change your understanding of the universe." The Nexus swirled, its energy intensifying. Jax and Diaz braced themselves, their hands gripping each other's shoulders. The light engulfed them, and the world dissolved once more. When their vision cleared, they found themselves standing on a platform, overlooking a vast cityscape. The buildings were a blend of organic and technological, their surfaces shimmering with bioluminescent light. Cravali warriors patrolled the streets, their weapons gleaming in the sunlight. Karak stood before them, his reptilian eyes fixed on them with a newfound respect. "Welcome to Craval, humans," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "We have much to discuss." Jax and Diaz stepped forward, their heads held high, their hearts filled with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. They had faced the trials, they had proven their worth, and now they were ready to face the future. A future where humans and Cravali might not just coexist, but collaborate, explore, and perhaps even forge a lasting friendship. The journey had just begun,